You know, sometimes it's the smallest moments that take your breath away. Not the grand gestures or the loud declarations, but the quiet ones. The ones that happen in stillness, when no one is watching. Like the way a big, gentle dog tilts his head the very first time he feels a baby kick from inside his human's belly. It's in that moment, when his ears prick forward, his eyes soften, and his whole body stills in awe, that you realize this isn't just a pet. This is a soul who understands love in a language words can't touch. Carl came into their lives at just 5 months old, a goofy, floppy-eared bundle of golden fur with paws too big for his body, and a tail that wagged like a metronome set to joy. He wasn't from a breeder or a fancy lineage. He was a shelter pup, overlooked and uncertain, until the day a young couple knelt in front of his kennel and whispered, "Hey buddy, you're coming home." From the very first night, Carl made himself at home. He didn't just sleep on the rug. He claimed the center of their world. He chased tennis balls until his tongue lolled out, wrestled with his human like they were equals, and greeted every sunrise with a full-body wiggle of excitement. But it was with the husband that his bond deepened fastest. They were two halves of the same spirit. Wild, loyal, endlessly playful. They ran through fields until their legs ached, soaked in rain puddles just for the splash, and collapsed on the porch at dusk, chests heaving with laughter and exhaustion. Carl wasn't just a dog to him. He was his shadow, his confidant, his brother in fur. Years passed as they do. Carl grew, 125 pounds of muscle, fur, and quiet strength. But his heart never changed. If anything, it grew wider. His eyes, once bright with puppy mischief, now held a calm wisdom, like he'd seen enough of life to know what truly mattered. He still played, yes, but he also knew when to rest his head on a tired lap, when to press his warm body against a bad dream, when to simply be present without needing to be the center of attention. And then, she became pregnant. No one said it out loud at first. No test was shown. No announcement made. But Carl knew. It started with small shifts. The way she moved more slowly in the mornings. The way she rested her hand on her stomach when she thought no one was looking. The scent of her skin, subtly, beautifully, changed. And Carl noticed. He stopped bounding into the room. No more leaping onto the couch. No roughhousing near her feet. Instead, he stayed close. Always within sight, always within reach, but with a new kind of reverence. His steps grew softer. His eyes never left her. When she sat on the couch, he'd lower himself beside her, resting his massive head on her lap, as if to say, "I've got you." Then came the afternoon that changed everything. She was lying on the couch, sunlight spilling across the floor, one hand absently tracing circles on her belly. Carl was dozing nearby, ears twitching at the sound of passing birds. And then, it happened. A tiny flutter, a little foot pressing outward from within. Her breath caught. She smiled. Carl lifted his head instantly. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply rose, padded over, and tilted his great head with a look of pure curiosity. What was that? He sniffed gently, then, with infinite care, pressed his broad muzzle against her stomach. And then, he froze. His ears lifted, his eyes widened, his whole body went still, except for the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest. He wasn't just smelling. He wasn't just listening. He was feeling. And in that silent communion between dog and unborn child, Something sacred passed between them. He stayed like that for minutes, motionless, mesmerized, until she whispered, "It's okay, Carl. That's your little brother." From that moment on, Carl's world had a new compass. He followed her everywhere. Not out of clinginess, but out of devotion. If she walked to the kitchen, he walked with her. If she sat to read, he curled at her feet. If she rested, he lay beside her, one paw draped over her leg like an anchor. He became her guardian, her silent sentinel. But here's the beautiful thing. Carl never lost himself. With her husband, he was still the same wild, joyful dog. They still chased balls at dusk. They still rolled in the grass like overgrown puppies. They still splashed through muddy puddles after rainstorms, emerging soaked and grinning. Carl knew, somehow, when to be the protector and when to be the playmate. He held both roles in perfect balance, as if love wasn't a finite resource, but an endless river that only grew deeper with use. And then, the baby arrived. The house filled with new sounds, cries in the night, coos in the morning, the soft rustle of tiny blankets. Many dogs panic at a newborn's cries. They retreat, they act out. But not Carl. The first time the baby cried, Carl didn't flinch. He simply rose from his bed, padded to the crib, and gently nudged the baby's tiny foot with his nose. When the cries softened, he laid down beside the bassinet and sighed, as if to say, "I'm here, you're safe." He never growled, never snapped, never showed a flicker of jealousy. Instead, he became the gentlest big brother imaginable. He let the baby tug his ears. He tolerated sticky fingers in his fur. He even learned to sleep through the night again, not because he didn't care, but because he knew his humans needed rest too. People often warn that when a baby comes, the dog gets pushed aside, forgotten in the chaos of diapers and feedings. But in their home, the opposite was true. Carl wasn't just remembered, he was cherished even more. Because now, he wasn't just the dog who brought them joy. He was the one who had held space for their growing love long before the baby took his first breath. He was the bridge between their old life and their new one. On quiet evenings, the family would sit together, father reading, mother nursing, baby dozing in her arms, and Carl would rest his head on her knee, eyes half closed, tail thumping softly against the floor. In those moments, the room felt full, not just of people, but of presence, of love that wasn't loud, but deep, steady, unshakable. Carl's story isn't just about a dog learning to share his humans. It's about a soul who understood from the very beginning that love isn't about possession, it's about protection. It's about showing up day after day, not because you have to, but because you choose to. He taught them that loyalty isn't a grand gesture, it's the quiet act of staying. He taught them that patience isn't passive, it's active love in stillness. He taught them that devotion doesn't need words, only presence. And now, years later, when the boy runs through the yard calling, "Carl, Carl," and the great golden dog comes barreling toward him, tongue lolling and tail a blur, you can still see it. The same gentle giant who once pressed his head to a pregnant belly and knew. Carl was more than a pet. He was a teacher, a guardian, a quiet hero in a world that often mistakes loudness for love. His story is a reminder that animals don't just live with us. They see us. They sense our shifts before we speak them. They hold space for our joy, our fear, our transformation. And in return, they ask for so little. A hand to rest on, a voice that calls their name. a place to belong. If this story touched your heart, take a moment tonight to look at your own pet, not just as an animal, but as a witness to your life, as a silent keeper of your quietest moments, as a love that never fades, only deepens with time. And if you believe the world needs more stories like Carl's, stories of quiet devotion, of loyalty that doesn't roar but simply stays, then please share this, like it, subscribe, because in a world that often feels fractured, these moments of connection are the threads that hold us together. At Kind Paws, we don't just tell stories, we honor them. We choose the real ones, the tender, the true, the ones that shimmer with the quiet magic of everyday love. And we share them, not for views, but for hearts. Thank you for being here, for seeing Carl not just as a dog, but as a soul who knew, from the first kick, that he was already a brother. And as the sun sets on their yard tonight, and Carl lies beside the now toddler who's fallen asleep mid-chase, his paw resting lightly on the boy's back, you'll know. Some loves are written in grand chapters, but the deepest ones, they're whispered in the silence between heartbeats. And Carl, he heard every one.